They shoved her into the open grave at her father's funeral. The crowd gasped. Her stepmother smiled. But when the lawyer read the will 30 minutes later, that smile vanished because the girl they tried to bury alive just inherited $7 billion, 3 companies, and the power to destroy everyone who ever hurt her. Ayana Adeyemi was 23 years old and already exhausted from living. Not the kind of tired you fix with a good night's sleep, but the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from working 3 jobs and still wondering if you'll make rent. Every morning at 4:30, her alarm screamed in the darkness of her studio apartment in southwest Atlanta, and she dragged herself out of bed to start her shift at Rosie's Diner on Metropolitan Parkway. She served coffee to truckers and construction workers until noon, smiling through the exhaustion, pocketing tips that sometimes added up to enough for groceries. Then she'd rush across town to stock shelves at the Save-A-Lot on Cascade Road, lifting boxes that made her back scream, scanning items until her eyes blurred. And when that shift ended at 6, she had just enough time to grab a gas station sandwich before her night shift. Cleaning offices downtown started at 7. She'd mop floors in empty corporate buildings until midnight, her reflection in the polished marble a ghost of who she used to be. 3 jobs, 7 days a week, and still the eviction notices kept sliding under her door. Her apartment was a testament to survival, not living. The studio was barely 300 square feet, with water stains spreading across the ceiling like dark continents on a map. Roaches scattered when she turned on the lights, and she'd stopped being disgusted by them months ago. They were just roommates now, unwelcome but persistent. Her furniture consisted of a mattress on the floor, a plastic table with 2 mismatched chairs she'd found on the curb, and a microwave that only worked if you hit it just right on the left side. The window air conditioner had died in July, and she couldn't afford to fix it, so she survived Atlanta's brutal summer heat with a $5 fan from the dollar store. Dinner most nights was ramen noodles or whatever she could afford from the dented can discount bin. Her shoes had holes in the soles that she covered with cardboard, replacing the cardboard every few days when it wore through. This was her life. This was all she'd ever known. But it wasn't always supposed to be this way. Ayana had memories, faded and precious, of a time before the poverty. She remembered her mother, Falami, as a woman who always smelled like cocoa butter and vanilla, who sang while she cooked, who made their tiny apartment feel like a palace just by being in it. Falami had worked as a nurse, and even though they never had much money, Ayana never felt poor when her mother was alive. They had each other, and somehow that was enough. But when Ayana was 8 years old, everything shattered. Her mother got sick, cancer, aggressive and merciless, and died within 6 months. Ayana remembered those final days in the hospital, her mother's hand thin and cold in hers, her voice barely a whisper. "Baby girl," Falami had said, "your father loves you. He can't be here, but he loves you. Don't ever forget that you're worthy of everything. Everything, baby, you hear me?" Ayana had nodded, not understanding, tears streaming down her face. "Who is he, Mama? Where is he?" But Falami just smiled sadly and closed her eyes. She died the next morning, and Ayana never got her answer. After her mother's death, Ayana went into foster care. She bounced between homes for 10 years, never quite fitting in anywhere, never quite feeling wanted. Some families were kind but overwhelmed. Others were there for the government check and nothing more. She learned early to keep her head down, work hard, and expect nothing from anyone. When she aged out of the system at 18, she was handed a garbage bag with her belongings and a bus pass, and that was it. No family, no support, no safety net, just the city of Atlanta and the grinding reality of trying to survive in it. She'd been surviving ever since, working herself into the ground, living paycheck to paycheck, sometimes not even making it that far. Her mother's words echoed in her mind sometimes. You're worthy of everything. But they felt like a cruel joke. Worthy of what? Worthy of roaches and eviction notices and feet that ached so badly she could barely stand. Ayana had stopped believing in fairy tales a long time ago. That Tuesday in September started like every other day. Ayana finished her morning shift at the diner, her uniform stained with coffee and bacon grease, her tips totaling $23 that she immediately calculated against her bills. Not enough. Never enough. She walked the 6 blocks to her apartment building because she couldn't afford the bus, her feet burning in her broken shoes, the Atlanta heat making her dizzy. When she turned onto her street, she stopped. There was a car parked in front of her building, a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows, so out of place in her neighborhood it might as well have been a spaceship. People didn't drive cars like that in her part of town. People didn't drive cars like that anywhere near her orbit. She almost walked past it, assuming it was there for someone else, for anyone else. But then the back door opened. A man stepped out, tall and dignified, probably in his 60s, wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. He was African. She could tell immediately from his features and the careful way he carried himself, and when he spoke, his accent confirmed it. Nigerian, she thought, though she couldn't be sure. "Miss Ayana Adeyemi?" he asked, and her heart lurched, because how did this man know her name? "I'm sorry, who are you, she managed, instinctively taking a step back. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "My name is Chukwuma Okonkwo. I'm an attorney. I represent the estate of Chinonso Okoro." The names meant nothing to her. She stared at him, confused, waiting for this to make sense. "I'm sorry, I think you have the wrong person," she said. "I don't know anyone named Chinonso Okoro." The lawyer's expression softened, something like pity crossing his face. "Miss Adeyemi, Chinonso Okoro was your father. He passed away 3 days ago. The funeral is tomorrow at 2 o'clock. You're requested to attend." The world tilted. Ayana's father. She had a father, and he had a name, and he was dead. All in the same breath, all in the same impossible moment. "My father?" she whispered. I never knew." Mr. Okonkwo nodded slowly. "I understand this is a shock. Your father kept his relationship with your mother private for many years, but he never forgot you, Miss Adeyemi. He followed your life from a distance." He reached into the car and pulled out a garment bag and a small envelope. "The funeral will be held at his estate in Buckhead. Here is appropriate attire and the address. Please come alone. There are complications with the family." He handed her the items, and before she could ask any of the 1,000 questions flooding her mind, he got back in the Mercedes and drove away, leaving her standing on the sidewalk holding a garment bag and everything she thought she knew about her life completely shattered. That night, Ayana couldn't sleep. She lay on her mattress staring at the ceiling, the garment bag hanging on the back of her door like an accusation. Inside was a simple but elegant black dress, the fabric softer than anything she'd ever touched, and a pair of shoes that actually fit. The envelope contained only an address in Buckhead, one of Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhoods where old money and new money collided in mansions behind iron gates. Her father had lived there. Her father had existed. Her father had known about her and never came. The anger came first, hot and sharp. How dare he watch her struggle, watch her suffer, watch her work herself into the ground and never once reach out. How dare he die before she could ask him why? But underneath the anger was something else, a desperate, childish hope she thought she'd killed years ago. He'd followed her life. He'd sent a lawyer. He'd wanted her at his funeral. Maybe, just maybe, there was a reason. Maybe he'd cared in his own broken way. She didn't know if she'd go. She fell asleep, still not knowing. But when her alarm went off at 4:30, She called in sick to all 3 jobs for the first time in 2 years, and she knew she'd made her decision. The estate in Buckhead was obscene. That was the only word Ayana could think of as the Uber driver pulled up to gates that looked like they belonged to a palace. Stone pillars, actual fountains with cherubs, a driveway that curved through manicured gardens toward a house, no, a mansion, that was bigger than her entire apartment building. The driver whistled low. "Somebody in there got money," he said, and Ayana could only nod, her mouth dry. She'd put on the black dress that morning with shaking hands, and it fit perfectly, which somehow made everything worse. Had her father known her size? Had he been watching that closely? She paid the driver with the last of her tip money and stepped out onto cobblestones, feeling like an imposter, like someone who'd wandered into the wrong movie. People were everywhere. Mourners in designer clothes, servers in crisp uniforms carrying trays of champagne, a string quartet playing something somber near the rose garden. Everyone looked expensive. Everyone looked like they belonged. Ayana walked toward the house with her head down, trying not to meet anyone's eyes, trying to be invisible. But she felt the stares, heard the whispers. "Who is she? I've never seen her before. Look at her shoes." She made it to the main hall where the service was being held, and that's when she saw them, the family. The woman at the front of the room was impossible to miss, draped in black Chanel, diamonds dripping from her ears and wrists, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun that probably required a professional. She was beautiful in a cold, sharp way, like a knife. Mid-40s, Ayana guessed, with the kind of ageless face that money could buy. This had to be Dalila, the wife, her stepmother technically, though the word felt absurd. Next to her stood a young man in an expensive suit, mid-20s, scrolling through his phone with an expression of bored entitlement. He had their father's nose, Ayana realized with a jolt, her half-brother then. And beside him, a young woman in designer black, taking a selfie, actually taking a selfie at a funeral, her face perfectly made up, her expression performatively sad for the camera. The stepsister. Ayana's stomach turned. This was her father's real family, the ones he'd chosen, the ones he'd claimed. Dalila's eyes found her across the room, and Ayana watched recognition flicker across her face. The woman's expression went from neutral to disgusted in half a second. She leaned over to whisper something to her son, and he looked up from his phone, following his mother's gaze. When his eyes landed on Ayana, he smirked. The daughter noticed the commotion and stopped taking photos long enough to stare, her perfectly painted lips curling into something cruel. They knew who she was. Somehow, they knew. Dalila stood and walked toward her, her heels clicking on the marble floor like gunshots. The room seemed to quiet as she approached, and Ayana felt every eye turn toward them. "So," Dalila said, her voice smooth as poison, "you're the bastard child, the mistake." The word hit like a slap. Ayana opened her mouth, closed it, had no idea what to say. I was invited," she managed. "My name is Ayana. I'm his daughter." Dalila's laugh was sharp and cold. "Daughter? Honey, you're a 9-month inconvenience from a fling that should have been forgotten. Your mother was paid very well to disappear. Clearly she didn't teach you to do the same." The son approached now, hands in his pockets, looking Ayana up and down like she was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "You've got some nerve showing up here," he said. His name was Jabari, she'd later learn, and he ran one of her father's companies with the confidence of someone who'd never had to prove himself. "This is a family event, for actual family." The daughter, Sana, had her phone out now, filming. "This is literally so embarrassing for you," she said, her voice saccharine and cruel. "Like, did you really think you'd fit in here? You're basically homeless, right? I can tell from your shoes." Ayana looked down at her feet, at the shoes Mr. Okonkwo had sent that had seemed so nice but apparently screamed poverty to these people, and felt something inside her crack. "I didn't come here to fit in," she said quietly. "I came to say goodbye to my father." Dalila's face twisted. "Your father, he never wanted you. He paid your whore mother to stay away, and when she died, he celebrated. You are nothing. You have always been nothing. And if you have any dignity at all, you'll leave before the service starts." Ayana wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, walk out, never look back. But something kept her feet planted. Maybe it was her mother's voice in her head, "You're worthy of everything." Maybe it was pure, stubborn pride. Maybe she just wanted to see the man who'd created her, even if it was only his body in a casket. "I'm staying," she said, and was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Dalila's eyes went cold. "Fine, but you sit in the back, with the staff. That's where you belong anyway." She turned on her heel and walked back to the front row, her children following, and Ayana was left standing alone in a room full of strangers who'd just witnessed her humiliation. The service was beautiful and empty. A pastor named Reverend Chimelu spoke about Chinonso Okoro as a pillar of the community, a devoted husband, a loving father. He talked about his business acumen, his philanthropy, his commitment to family values. Ayana sat in the last row, squeezed between a woman who worked in the kitchen and a young man in a driver's uniform, and listened to them describe a man she didn't recognize. Dalila gave a speech, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief, talking about their 25 years of marriage, their beautiful children, their perfect life. She never mentioned Ayana, never acknowledged that Chinonso had another daughter. It was like Ayana didn't exist, like her mother hadn't existed, like the love that created her was so shameful it had to be erased from the official narrative. Then Jabari spoke, talking about carrying on his father's legacy as his only son, about the companies he would run, the empire he would build. Ayana felt sick. The service ended and people filed out toward the burial plot, on the edge of the property near a grove of old oak trees. The casket was carried by 6 men in black suits, and Ayana followed at a distance, staying back from the crowd. She didn't belong here, they'd made that clear, but she'd come this far and she needed to see it through. The burial plot was beautiful, a small hill overlooking the estate, with a view of the Atlanta skyline in the distance. The casket was lowered slowly while the pastor said final prayers. Dalila stood at the edge of the grave, flanked by her children accepting condolences like a queen receiving tribute. Ayana stayed 50 feet back behind everyone else, just watching, just saying her own silent goodbye to a man she'd never known. When the prayers ended and people started to drift away, Ayana found herself moving closer. She didn't know why. Maybe she just wanted one moment, 1 second, to stand by her father's grave and pretend she mattered to him. She walked to the edge of the plot, looked down at the casket settling into the earth, and whispered, "I wish I'd known you." That's when Dalila appeared beside her. "You don't belong here," she hissed, her voice low enough that no one else could hear. Ayana turned to face her. "He was my father too," she said, and she heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it. Dalila's face twisted with rage. "You are nothing," she spat. "You will always be nothing." And then she pushed, hard, both hands on Ayana's shoulders, a violent shove that sent her stumbling backward. Ayana's feet hit the edge of the grave, hit nothing but air, and then she was falling, 6 feet down into the open earth beside her father's casket. She landed hard on her side in the dirt. The wind knocked out of her lungs, pain exploding through her shoulder and hip. Above her she heard gasps, screams, someone shouting, "Oh my God!" She looked up and saw Dalila standing at the edge of the grave, looking down at her, and the woman was smiling. Actually, smiling. "Now you're where you belong," Dalila said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "In the dirt with nothing." Ayana couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Dirt was in her mouth, her hair, her eyes. People were shouting now, and she heard footsteps running toward the grave. 2 groundskeepers appeared above her, lowering a ladder, helping her climb out. Her dress was ruined, covered in dirt and grass stains. Her shoulders screamed with pain. Every eye was on her, some shocked, some pitying, some filming on their phones. Dalila stood back, her hand over her mouth in a performance of horror. "It was an accident," she said to the gathering crowd. "She stumbled. I tried to catch her." It was such an obvious lie that Ayana almost laughed. Almost. But she couldn't find her voice. Couldn't find anything except the humiliation burning through her like acid. That's when Mr. Okonkwo appeared, moving through the crowd with purpose. His face was grave, his jaw set. "Everyone," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs and whispers. "To the library, now. The will reading begins in 5 minutes. This is not optional." Dalila's performance of concern vanished, replaced by a satisfied smile. "Of course," she said. "Let's get this over with." She linked arms with Jabari and Sana and walked toward the house like she was going to collect a prize. Mr. Okonkwo approached Ayana, still standing by the grave, covered in dirt and shame. "Miss Adeyemi," he said gently, "you'll want to be there for this." She looked at him, at his kind eyes, and saw something there, a glimmer of knowledge, of secrets about to be revealed. "Why?" she whispered. "What does it matter? They've made it clear I'm nothing." He smiled, just barely. "Come to the library, you'll see." The library was massive, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, with a conference table in the center that could seat 20. Dalila sat at the head of the table like she owned it, Jabari on her right, Sana on her left. They were already talking about money, their voices carrying across the room with casual arrogance. "I'm thinking we sell the Savannah house," Dalila was saying. "It's too old-fashioned. We need something modern." Jabari nodded. "I want to expand the tech company into AI. We need at least 50 million for the initial investment." Sana was scrolling through vacation rentals on her phone. "I need like a month in the Maldives," she said. "For content. My followers are expecting something major." They didn't even glance at Ayana as she entered, still covered in dirt from the grave. She took a seat at the far end of the table, as far from them as possible, her whole body aching. Mr. Okonkwo stood at the head of the table, a thick manila envelope in his hands. The room gradually quieted as other family members and business associates filed in. Cousins, executives, people whose names Ayana didn't know and would never learn. When everyone was seated, Mr. Okonkwo opened the envelope with deliberate care. "This is the last will and testament of Chinonso Okoro," he said, his voice formal and clear, updated and notarized 1 week before his death. Dalila leaned back in her chair, confident. Jabari was already making notes on his phone about business plans. Sana was still shopping for flights. None of them had any idea what was coming. Mr. Okonkwo began to read. "To my wife, Dalila Okoro, I leave the beach house in Savannah, Georgia, and a sum of $2 million. The room went silent. Dalila's smile faltered. "Wait," she said. "Just the Savannah house? What about this house? What about the penthouse in New York?" Mr. Okonkwo continued as if she hadn't spoken. "To my son, Jabari Okoro, I leave a sum of $1 million and full ownership of the BMW dealership in Augusta, Georgia." Jabari stood up so fast his chair screeched across the floor. "That's the smallest business. What about Okoro Technologies?" "I run Okoro Technologies." Mr. Okonkwo's expression didn't change. "To my daughter, Sana Okoro, I leave a sum of $500,000 and the family jewelry collection valued at approximately $200,000. Sana's mouth fell open. $500,000. That's not even enough to buy a decent condo in Midtown. This is insane. The room was chaos now, voices rising, people demanding explanations. Dalila was on her feet, her face flushed with rage. "There's been a mistake," she said. "This can't be right. I was married to him for 25 years. Mr. Okonkwo raised his hand for silence, and somehow the room obeyed. "To my daughter, Ayana Adeyemi," he said, and the room went dead quiet. Every head turned toward Ayana, sitting at the end of the table in her dirt-stained dress, her hair a mess, her shoulders still throbbing. She felt like she couldn't breathe. "I leave the controlling shares, 70% of Okoro Technologies, valued at approximately $4.2 billion. Dalila screamed. Actually screamed. "What?" Mr. Okonkwo continued, his voice steady. "The entirety of Okoro Real Estate Holdings, valued at $2.1 billion. Jabari slammed his hands on the table. "This is a mistake. She's not even—" "Okoro Investment Group, valued at $900 million. Sana was crying now, mascara running down her face. "This isn't fair! This isn't fair!" "The primary residence here in Buckhead, valued at $12 million. The penthouse in New York, valued at $8 million. The villa in Martha's Vineyard, valued at $6 million. And all remaining assets, accounts, properties, and investments. The total estate value is approximately $7.3 billion. The room erupted. Dalila rushed toward the table, trying to grab the will. "I'll contest this. 25 years. I gave him 25 years. Mr. Okonkwo stepped back, the document safe in his hands. "The will is ironclad, Mrs. Okoro, witnessed by 3 attorneys and a superior court judge. It cannot be contested." Jabari was shouting about lawsuits, about unfairness, about how he'd worked for the company. Sana was sobbing into her hands, and Ayana sat frozen, unable to process what she'd just heard. $7 billion. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. "There's more," Mr. Okonkwo said, and somehow his voice cut through the noise. Mr. Okoro left a personal letter to be read aloud. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, and the room went silent again. He began to read. "Ayana, my daughter, my greatest regret is not claiming you publicly while I lived. Your mother, Folami, was the love of my life. When I met her, I was already engaged to Dalila, a marriage arranged by our families for business purposes, for appearances, for all the wrong reasons. I should have had the courage to walk away. I didn't. I married Dalila as expected, and I kept Folami as my secret. I told myself I was protecting her from the scrutiny, from my family's judgment. The truth is, I was protecting myself. I was a coward. When Folami got pregnant with you, I should have claimed you both. I should have divorced Dalila and built a life with the woman I actually loved. Instead, I gave Folami money and promises and nothing real. She never asked for more. She never demanded anything. She just loved me, and she loved you, and I failed you both." The letter continued, and Ayana felt tears streaming down her face, unable to stop them. "After your mother died, I watched you from a distance. I knew where you were, what schools you attended, every foster home you lived in. I put money in trust accounts you didn't know existed, waiting for the day I'd have the courage to face you. But I never did. I watched you struggle. I watched you work 3 jobs. I watched you live in poverty while I lived in luxury, and I did nothing. I told myself I was waiting for the right time. There was never a right time. There was only my cowardice." Mr. Okonkwo's voice was thick with emotion now. "But I also watched your character. I saw how you helped your neighbors, even when you could barely feed yourself. I saw how you worked without complaining, how you showed up every day with dignity. I had investigators follow my legitimate children too, I saw Dalila embezzle from my companies. I saw Jabari run the tech division into the ground with his incompetence and arrogance. I saw Sanaa waste hundreds of thousands of dollars on vanity while people starved. They proved themselves greedy, wasteful, and cruel. You proved yourself worthy. You are my legacy, Ayana, not the children I raised with privilege who learn nothing but entitlement. You, the daughter I abandoned but who survived anyway, who thrived in spite of me, not because of me. I'm giving you everything because you're the only one who deserves it. Build the empire I couldn't. Be the person I failed to be. Help people the way I should have helped you. I'm sorry I can't say this to your face. I'm sorry for everything. But know that you were loved. You are loved. You are my pride. You are my daughter. You are everything. Your father, Chinonso Okoro. The silence in the room was absolute. Ayana couldn't see through her tears, couldn't speak, couldn't move. Her father had loved her, had watched her, had seen her, and he'd given her everything, not just the money, but the validation she'd spent her whole life craving. This is bullshit, Dalila shrieked, shattering the moment. 25 years of my life. I'll sue. I'll fight this. Mr. Okonkwo's face hardened. You may try, Mrs. Okoro, but the will is legal and binding. Additionally, our forensic accountants have discovered that you've embezzled approximately $15 million from the Okoro companies over the past decade. Mr. Okoro knew but chose not to prosecute while he was alive. That decision now rests with Miss Adeyemi as the majority owner of said companies. Dalila went white. You can't prove that. We can. And we will, if you choose to contest this will. Additionally, Mrs. Okoro, you have 30 days to vacate this property. It now belongs to Miss Adeyemi. Jabari turned on Ayana, his face twisted with rage. You're just going to take everything. You don't even know how to run a company. You're nobody. Ayana found her voice. Finally, it came out stronger than she expected. I'm his daughter, and you watched your mother push me into a grave. Jabari faltered. We were upset. We're still family, right? We can work together. No, Ayana said. The word felt good, felt powerful. We're not family. You made that very clear. You're an employee now. Start acting like one. She turned to Mr. Okonkwo. When can we start going through the financials? I want to know everything. He smiled, a real smile this time. Whenever you're ready, Miss Adeyemi, I'm at your service. Ayana stood, every eye in the room on her, and walked out of the library with her head held high. Behind her, she heard Dalila screaming, Sanaa crying, Jabari demanding lawyers. She didn't look back. The next few weeks were a whirlwind that Ayana barely remembered later. She moved out of her roach-infested studio apartment and into the Buckhead mansion, while Dalila packed her things with venomous efficiency, shooting murderous looks at Ayana whenever their paths crossed. The house was obscene. 12 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, a home theater, a wine cellar, a pool, a guest house. Ayana spent the first night in the master bedroom, unable to sleep because the bed was too soft, the room too quiet, the reality too impossible. She kept expecting to wake up in her studio, this whole thing revealed as a cruel dream. But morning came, and she was still in the mansion, and Mr. Okonkwo arrived at 8 with 3 accountants and a stack of files 2 feet high. Learning the empire took months. Okoro Technologies was the largest asset, a software and AI company with 1,200 employees across 4 states, specializing in educational technology and data analytics. It was worth $4.2 billion on paper, but Mr. Okonkwo warned her that Jabari had been running the innovation division into the ground for 2 years, pursuing flashy projects that looked good in press releases but lost money. Okoro Real Estate Holdings owned commercial properties in 12 states, office buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes. It was steady, profitable, boring in the best way, And Okoro Investment Group was venture capital, private equity, the kind of high-risk, high-reward investing that had made her father wealthy. Ayana spent 16 hours a day reading reports, attending meetings, learning the language of business. She discovered she had a mind for it, the same analytical skills that had helped her budget $3 dinners now applied to million-dollar deals. She also discovered the rot. Dalila had been embezzling for years, moving money through shell companies, falsifying expense reports, living a luxury lifestyle funded by theft. The evidence was overwhelming. Mr. Okonkwo's forensic accountants had built a case that could send her to prison for a decade. Jabari's division had lost $80 million in the past 18 months on projects he'd greenlit without proper due diligence, projects that benefited his friends and his ego but not the company. And Sanaa had been using corporate credit cards for personal expenses, clothes, trips, dinners, shopping sprees that totaled almost $300,000. The picture was clear. They'd been treating her father's empire as their personal piggy bank, and nobody had stopped them because Chinonso had been too sick and too guilty to care. Ayana called her first board meeting at Okoro Technologies on a Thursday morning, 6 weeks after the funeral. She wore a tailored suit that Mr. Okonkwo had helped her pick out, and she'd practiced her speech 100 times. The boardroom was full of executives who'd worked with her father for decades, men in expensive suits who looked at her with barely concealed skepticism. And at the center of it all sat Jabari, slouched in his chair, scrolling through his phone like he had better places to be. He glanced up when she entered, smirked, and went back to his phone. "Let's make this quick," he said. "I have lunch at 1. Ayana took her seat at the head of the table, her father's seat, and opened her folder. "This won't take long," she said. "Effective immediately, Jabari Okoro is removed from his position as Vice President of Innovation and relieved of all duties with this company." The room exploded. Jabari shot to his feet. "You can't do that. I built that division." "You destroyed that division," Ayana said calmly. She slid a report across the table. $80 million in losses over 18 months, 3 failed product launches, a harassment complaint from a senior engineer that you buried. You're fired. "I'm family," Jabari shouted. "You can't just—" "I'm the majority shareholder," Ayana interrupted. "I absolutely can. Your severance package is $50,000, which is more than generous given your performance. Security will escort you out." She nodded to the 2 security guards standing by the door, and they moved forward. Jabari looked around the table, desperate, looking for allies. Nobody met his eyes. "This is insane," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm calling our lawyers. I'm calling—" "Call whoever you want," Ayana said. "You're still fired. And Jabari? The company card you've been using, it's canceled, effective 5 minutes ago." She watched the realization cross his face. No company card meant no more bottle service, no more dinners, no more pretending to be a big shot on someone else's dime. The security guards took his arms gently but firmly and walked him toward the door. He was shouting the whole way, threats and curses and promises of lawsuits. The door closed behind him, and the room was silent. Ayana turned to the rest of the board. "I'm promoting Kwame Mensah to Vice President of Innovation, effective immediately. He's been doing Jabari's actual work for the past year anyway. Any objections?" She looked around the table. Nobody objected. "Good. Now let's talk about the product roadmap for the next quarter." The meeting continued, and Ayana felt something shift in the room. The skepticism replaced by cautious respect. She'd just fired her own half-brother without hesitation. She'd just proven she wasn't playing games. When the meeting ended, several executives approached to introduce themselves properly, to offer their support, to tell her they were glad she was in charge. And Kwame Mensah, a brilliant Nigerian engineer in his 30s, who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times, shook her hand with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "You have no idea what this means." Ayana smiled. "Yes, I do. Now let's build something amazing." Dalila's desperation came 2 months later. Ayana was in her office, her father's old office, which she'd redecorated to feel less like a shrine and more like a workspace, when security called. "Ma'am, there's a Dalila Okoro at the gate. She's requesting to speak with you." Ayana closed her eyes. She could have said no. Should have said no. "Let her through," she said, but she doesn't come past the foyer." 10 minutes later, Dalila stood in the marble entrance hall of the mansion she used to own, looking smaller somehow, older. Her designer clothes were still expensive, but there was something worn about her now, something defeated. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, and Ayana heard the effort it took for her to be civil. "What do you want, Dalila?" Ayana asked. No pleasantries, no pretense. Dalila took a breath. "I need help. The Savannah house sold, but after taxes and debts, I have almost nothing left. The $1 million is gone, legal fees, trying to contest the will. I'm living in a rental. I need you to give me one of the smaller properties, just something small. I won't ask for anything else." Ayana stared at her. This woman who'd pushed her into a grave, who'd called her nothing, who'd embezzled millions. "You stole $15 million from my father's companies," Ayana said quietly. "You lived in luxury for decades while I ate ramen. You pushed me into my father's grave in front of 200 people. And now you want my help?" Dalila's face flushed. "I was angry. You ruined everything. "I didn't ruin anything," Ayana interrupted. "You did. You embezzled. You raised entitled children who can't function without money they didn't earn. You made your choices." "Please," Dalila said, and there were actual tears now. "I have nothing. I'm 50 years old. Who's going to hire me? I'll give you anything. Just help me." Ayana felt nothing. No satisfaction in seeing her broken. No anger anymore. Just exhaustion. "I'll make you one offer," she said. "The district attorney has the evidence of your embezzlement. They're ready to file charges. You're looking at 10 years in prison. But if you plead guilty, return what you can, and cooperate fully, I'll support minimum sentencing. You'll do maybe 2 years instead of 10. Dalila's mouth opened, closed. "You'd send me to prison?" "You sent yourself to prison," Ayana said. "I'm offering you a chance to minimize the damage. Take it or don't. I don't care anymore." Dalila left without another word, and 3 weeks later, she was arrested at her rental apartment in East Atlanta. The news covered it. Widow of tech mogul charged with embezzlement. And Ayana watched the coverage with detached interest. In the end, Dalila took the plea deal. 2 years in federal prison, restitution of $2 million that she sold everything to scrape together. Ayana visited her once in jail, not out of forgiveness, but out of closure. Dalila sat across from her in an orange jumpsuit, looking hollow. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "The plea deal. You could have let me rot." Ayana considered the question. "Because my father taught me something, even in death. Revenge feels good for a moment, but building something that helps people feels good forever. You destroyed yourself. I don't need to destroy you more." Dalila started crying, real sobs this time, her whole body shaking. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry." Ayana stood. "I know," she said, and she walked out, free in a way Dalila would never be. Sanaa's fall was public and brutal. 2 days after the will reading, she posted a YouTube video titled "My Evil Stepsister Stole My Inheritance," and it went viral immediately. 2 million views in 24 hours. But the comments weren't what she expected. Someone had leaked footage from the funeral, Dalila pushing Ayana into the grave, standing over her smiling. The clip spread across TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Suddenly, Sana wasn't the victim. She was the villain's daughter, her comment section filled with fury. You stood there and filmed her suffering. Your mom tried to kill her and you did nothing. You don't deserve a single dollar. Within 48 hours, Sana lost 1.5 million followers. Her sponsorship deals, makeup companies, fashion brands, lifestyle apps, all canceled. Her Instagram went from ads and partnerships to desperate posts trying to explain, to justify, to salvage something. It didn't work. 6 months later, Sana showed up at Okoro Technologies headquarters. Security called Ayana before letting her up, and Ayana almost said no. But curiosity won. Sana walked into her office looking like a different person. No designer clothes, no professional makeup, just jeans and a hoodie and the kind of exhaustion Ayana recognized from her own mirror a year ago. What do you want? Ayana asked, not unkindly. Sana sat down without being invited, and Ayana saw her hands were shaking. I need a job, she said. I can't get hired anywhere. My name is toxic. I'm living with a roommate in a basement in Decatur. I'm working retail and I can barely make rent. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I was awful to you, but I don't know what else to do. Ayana studied her, saw something genuine in her desperation. Why should I help you? She asked. Sana's eyes filled with tears. Because you're better than us, better than we ever were, and maybe I can learn to be better too. I don't know, I'm just asking. Ayana thought about it, thought about the girl she used to be, desperate and alone. Thought about her father's letter, help people the way I should have helped you. She sighed. I'll give you a job, she said, and watched hope flare in Sana's eyes. Entry level, in the mailroom, $22 an hour. You'll work for it. You'll start at the bottom, and if you complain once, if you act entitled once, you're gone. Understood? Sana nodded frantically. Yes, thank you. I'll work hard, I promise. And Sana, Ayana said as the girl stood to leave, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this because I refuse to become the kind of person who kicks people when they're down. Don't make me regret it. Sana left, and Ayana sat back in her chair, wondering if she'd just made a mistake or the right choice. Time would tell. 1 year after the funeral, Ayana stood in the ballroom of the Buckhead mansion, her mansion, surrounded by Atlanta's elite. She'd transformed the space into a fundraising gala for the Falami Foundation, the non-profit she'd created in her mother's memory. The foundation provided scholarships for children of single parents, funded after-school programs in underserved communities, and offered job training for people transitioning out of poverty or foster care. Tonight's gala would raise $50 million. $50 million. Ayana wore a custom gown in deep purple, her mother's favorite color, and moved through the crowd with a confidence she'd built one terrifying day at a time. She'd learned to navigate this world of wealth and power, but she'd never forgotten where she came from. She still visited her old neighborhood, still talked to the people who'd been her neighbors when she had nothing. The highlight of the evening was her speech. Ayana stood on the stage looking out at 500 faces, politicians, celebrities, business leaders, people who used to ignore her and now courted her favor. She gripped the podium and spoke from her heart. A year ago, she began, I was pushed into a grave, literally. At my father's funeral, my stepmother shoved me into an open grave and told me I belonged in the dirt with nothing. The room went silent. They tried to bury me. But here's what they didn't understand. You can't bury someone who's meant to rise. My father gave me more than money. He gave me proof that your beginning doesn't determine your ending. That the people who hurt you don't get to write your story. You do. She talked about her mother, about growing up in poverty, about foster care and 3 jobs and eviction notices. She talked about inheriting billions and being terrified she'd fail. She talked about the Folami Foundation's first year, 5,000 scholarships awarded, 15 job training centers opened, 3,000 people helped out of poverty and into careers. "We're not charity," she said. "We're investment. We invest in people the world has overlooked. The way my father should have invested in me earlier but eventually did. And we're just getting started." The applause was thunderous. People stood. Some were crying. Afterward, dozens approached her, offering partnerships, donations, support. But the moment that mattered most came at the end of the night. A young woman approached, maybe 19, with nervous eyes and calloused hands. "Miss Adeyemi," she said quietly, "I'm Zainab. I got one of your foundation scholarships. I'm at Georgia Tech now, studying engineering. I wanted to say thank you. I was working 3 jobs like you. I thought I'd never get out. And now," she started crying, "now I'm going to graduate debt-free. You changed my life." Ayana pulled her into a hug, her own eyes wet. "No," she whispered. "You changed your own life. You did the work. I just opened a door. Walk through it and don't look back." When Zainab left, Ayana stood alone in the emptying ballroom and felt something she'd never quite felt before. Purpose. Not just wealth, not just revenge, not just survival. Purpose. The next morning, Ayana drove to the cemetery. She did this every Sunday without fail, her one ritual in a life that had become unrecognizably busy. Her father's grave was on the estate, in the spot where she'd fallen, where they'd tried to bury her spirit along with his body. But now it was peaceful. She'd had gardens planted around it, a bench installed, wind chimes that sang in the breeze. She sat on the bench with a bouquet of white roses and told him about her week, about the foundation's success, about Kwame's promotion to Chief Innovation Officer, about the new AI literacy program they were launching in 50 underserved schools, about Sana, who'd worked her way up to junior assistant in the marketing department and was actually good at her job when she tried. "They tried to bury me here, Dad," she said quietly, touching the headstone. "Right here, in this spot, pushed me into this hole and told me I was nothing." She smiled through tears. "But you know what? You planted me, like a seed. They meant it as an ending, but it was a beginning. Everything grew from here, the empire, the foundation, the person I became." She stood, placed the roses on his grave, and looked out over the estate that used to belong to him, and now belonged to her. In the distance, she could see the Atlanta skyline, the city where she'd struggled and survived, and ultimately triumphed. "I hope I made you proud," she whispered. And in the wind chimes song, in the morning sun, in the empire she'd built and the lives she'd changed, she felt her answer. She had. So that's the story of how a girl they tried to bury alive became the woman who changed everything. Ayana Adeyemi went from 3 jobs and a roach-infested apartment to $7 billion and an empire. But more importantly, she went from invisible to unstoppable. She took the cruelty meant to destroy her and transformed it into purpose. She took the inheritance they tried to deny her and used it to help thousands of people just like her. Overlooked, underestimated, worthy of so much more than the world told them they deserved. Dalila served 18 months and now works at a call center, living quietly in a modest apartment forever marked by her crimes. Jabari manages a small tech startup after 3 years of unemployment taught him humility he should have learned decades ago. Sana still works at Okoro Technologies, no longer in the mailroom but not in the executive suite either, building a career on actual merit for the first time in her life. And Ayana? She expanded the empire to $12 billion. She helped 100,000 families escape poverty. She donated $500 million to education. She became one of the most influential women in American business. featured on magazine covers, speaking at conferences, inspiring a generation. But every Sunday, without fail, she sits by her father's grave and remembers who she was before any of this. She remembers the girl who worked 3 jobs, who ate ramen, who had holes in her shoes, because that girl is still inside her, and that girl is the reason she'll never forget what matters. If this story moved you, if it inspired you, if it reminded you that your current situation doesn't determine your destination, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Smash that like button. Drop a comment telling me what part of Ayana's story hit you the hardest. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're worthy of everything, even when the world tells them they're nothing. We've got more incredible stories coming your way. Stories of underdogs who became champions, of justice that finally arrived, of people who rose from the ashes stronger than anyone imagined. You don't want to miss what's next. Until then, remember, they can push you down, but they can't keep you there. Not if you refuse to stay buried. I'll see you in the next one.